All right, so we are rounding the corner on day 3 of our blog project. We only have 2 more days left in React. That is the bad news. The good news is that next week we have a project week coming up. So reminder for you guys to get a list of questions together in terms of things that you're stuck on your capstone, any concepts that we're stuck on. It doesn't matter how far ago the question goes back, right? We could go all the way back to HTML if I don't understand the difference between a period and a pound sign in CSS, all the way up to React of, hey, how are we passing around props, or why do we need things in state, or anything related to that. So next week is very much meant to be a catch-up week on homework assignments, catch-up week on any concepts that we're at. It's kind of a breather as we are approaching the 2/3 mark of our program. And so that is what is on the agenda. Tonight is finishing up blog project. Tomorrow night we'll be finishing up the chat project, and then leaving it open to any questions from there. Does anyone have general questions to kick off the evening before we dive back into the blog project? I don't know if we're actually at the 2/3 mark. What, 16 out of 24? Yep, exactly at the 2/3 mark by the end of the week. Okay, let's go ahead and dive right on into our blog project. So I am going to head into my week 15 folder. And because we are moving over from day 2 over to day 3, I'm going to pop open my day 2 blog. I'm going to command delete my node modules folder or right click move to trash. Either one will work. I'm going to head back up to day 2 blog, right click duplicate that, rename that as my day 3 blog. Pop that open in VS Code. While that is opening up, I'm also going to open my week 9, day 3, which was my final version of my blog project in vanilla JavaScript. In my day 3 blog, I'm going to right click, open in integrated terminal, and run my npm install to get my node modules back in the day 3 folder. And finally, I'm going to do my npm start, and that should pull up where we left off the blog from last night. I will also go live. I will also do a live share. For React. And a live share of my vanilla.js. And I think we will start tonight with the new post button. So we'll give you guys a chance to get your project set up, and then we will dive in. Good to go? Anyone need another minute? Okay. So we initially had in our source folder in our app.js, we linked to the router, right? That's got our homepage, that's got all of our pages in it. But if we look in our homepage, we are going directly to the new post link. We did that so that we could understand the whole flow of pulling data out of local storage, mapping over it, getting the router set up so that we could access those specific posts, all of that good stuff in there, right? But if we look at our original blog project and I go live on that, we can actually see, and you know what, before I forget, I need to make sure I'm not sharing my server. Nope, we're good. Okay. Um, Initially we had the login button, right? And if you were logged in, that would be the only way that you could actually get to the new post page. So that's what I want to build out as our first flow. So easy enough to get started on that. I'm going to comment out my link to my new post and instead put in my login. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And now if I'm on my 3000, I should see the login link instead. Okay, so if I click on login, we have not brought that login page over yet. That's the work that we need to do. So I'm going to pop open my login.js. I'm going to go over to my vanilla JavaScript and HTML and grab my login.html. We have seen this. I think this is the last page we need to bring over. So that is good news. So we've got this login form submitted. It's only got 2 form fields. That's not too bad. Our submit button and then the JavaScript to make it all work. Okay, well, let's take that HTML to get started. I'm going to throw the whole thing in a class name of container. And then I will take this entire H1 and the form, and I'm going to paste that into my React code. Now, a couple things that we should be getting pretty used to when we move over HTML code. We've got to comment out the HTML comments to make them JavaScript comments. We have to update our for tags to use HTML4 instead in React. That is because for is a special reserved word in JavaScript. So we convert that over to HTML4. I'm going to save and take a look and see what this looks like in the browser. And we've got our login moved over, and we've got a pretty good starting point there. Let me pop open the chat before I forget, because I don't want to miss anything in there. Okay. So we've got our we've got our form fields moved over. We also have to update our event in JavaScript. So I'm going to come to the login, and I'm going to say const login form submitted is equal to an event. And then I've got to update my event tag down here. So I'm going to change this to capital S. I'm going to take out my quotes, and I'm going to take out the event and leave that in curly braces instead. And then just to make sure everything's wired up, let's event prevent default console log our login form submitted. Pop open our console. Refresh. And I forgot one step. We have some classes that we haven't converted to class names. And then I will take a break after this and let you guys catch up. Looks like there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different classes. Don't want to do those by hand. So I will use find and replace. It will say any place where you find a class equals, replace it with a class name equals. Find and replace on all. Save, come over, refresh. We get rid of our errors. We click the login button and we get our login form submitted. Sorry, we'll take a break there, let you guys catch up. Know that went a little fast, but remember, these are the basic steps of converting React over, right? Class to class name, update events, make them functions, update the on submit to be camel cased, curly brace them, change our HTML4s over to or our regular fours over to HTML4s, do a find and replace on any class names, right? These are the basic steps of converting some React code over. So we'll give you guys a breather. Remember to check your HTML console, make sure that there are no errors in there. That is a good way to make sure that you got all of your HTML code over. And then always just take a check and see if it looks right, see if you can submit the form. There's a request for, can you explain what the event prevent default does again? Yeah, the browser does something really annoying by default, right? What it basically does is it refreshes the page. because back in the day of form submissions, the only way that we could deal with a form submission was sending the data back to the server and letting the server deal with that data. So if we disable this event prevent default and type in A, B, C, D, E, F and hit the login button, you see the whole page kind of refreshes for a split second and clears everything out. What it's trying to do, the browser is trying to do, is the default behavior of submitting that form to the server. And we're like, but we don't really have a backend server, right? We're just working in the front end. We want to deal with that form submission ourselves with our own submit. And so what this event prevent default does is it says, browser, stop trying to be helpful. We're taking care of the form submission ourselves. Just don't do the default thing where you refresh the page and send the data to the server. Let us handle it instead. And so that is what the event prevent default does. If you are all caught up, you should be able to refresh your login page, have no errors in the console, and be able to type something in both form fields, hit the login button, and see that the login form has been submitted. Anyone need another minute? Anyone have some errors that they need to work through? Okay, rolling on forward here. So let's look back at our vanilla code. We've got the H1 showing up. Now we've got to dive into the last part that we haven't moved over, which is the login.js. So I'm going to go ahead and pop open our login.js. Good news is we already have the login form submitted that we've moved over here. So in theory, this should be a pretty easy move over. But we're going to do something a little differently. In this one, we have the constant username and password, and we use two different methods for extracting that data out. One method we used was using the event target, and then we use the ID of username to extract out the value. We actually do something pretty similar to that over in our new post. In our new post, we build up this object called post using the form elements. Where does this form come from? The form happens to come from the event target. So that is, both of those are called uncontrolled inputs. What do we mean by uncontrolled? It just means that the HTML is controlling the input. It's not necessarily React that's controlling the input. And that works fine, whether we're using the event target or we're using the event target in vanilla JavaScript. Both are totally fine, acceptable React code. This, however, is not. When we get into React, we don't want to be accessing the document object model directly. And so you could use event target elements here, but we're going to get a little more practice with state. We are going to switch our uncontrolled inputs to controlled inputs. Well, why do we want to do that? Sometimes you want to have the form submit and then clear out the values of the form. Sometimes you may want to display an error message to the user, right? There are different reasons as to why you want the form values stored in state instead of letting the browser take care of them. So again, this event target elements is perfectly fine in React and allowed if you are using uncontrolled inputs. We are going to switch our inputs over to controlled inputs to get practice with them. And then the third way of doing it is reaching into the document object model. And 95% of the time, if you're doing document.get whatever, that is something we want to avoid in React because we can usually access those properties better using state. So let's get a little practice with that. I'm going to come up in my login, make sure you're not in new post, and I'm going to set up two new state variables. So we usually put state and anything else that uses a React hook right after that first line of the component. So when we organize our files, we try to organize it hooks first any functions or other events second, and then the return of the HTML that's coming out as the last section. So I'm going to say const username and set username is equal to a use state that starts out as an empty quote. Inputs don't like being null. Inputs would prefer to start out as an empty string, and you may even see a warning in the console if you started this out as a null value instead of empty string. Make sure your input came through. You may get an error that use state is not defined if your import did not automatically come through. And then we're going to do our password and our set password, which are also going to come from use state and start out as an empty string. Now we get to wire both of these up. So I'm going to go down to this input, and I'm going to add two things. One, the value. Oops, make sure you don't spell password wrong. I spelled password wrong in my use state up here. Make sure you don't have that wrong. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is add my value username. And a very common mistake is to forget to attach the onChange event. So if you're ever setting up inputs, you will see this warning that appears that says you've provided a value prop without an onChange. If you happen to not have your console open, you may miss this. And so when you type in here, I'm typing on my keyboard and it's not doing anything. It's a very common mistake to put a value on, but not the onChange. The onChange is what is getting React to go, oh, you're typing something in here. Let me set that value into state to trigger a re-render. So in order to get this working right, in addition to the value, we need to add the onChange, which is going to take the event, and it is going to set the username to the event target value. Then we are going to rinse and repeat here onto the password field. So the value will be password, and we will set the password to the event target value. Save, refresh, our console should be clear, and we should be able to type in both fields. So our value and our onChange both wired up to our inputs. And, adding the value and the onChange and setting up the state variable, we are now setting up our code to be controlled by React instead of uncontrolled, which means the HTML is taking care of it for us. Okay, we've got our button type submit here and our login. Because it is a type submit, it is going to trigger our login form submitted. Our login form submitted, we already have going on here, but other than our event prevent default, instead of just logging out login form submitted, let's also log out our username and our password. That is going to confirm that we have access to both of them from state. So I come over, I hit my login button, I see my ABC and my 123 coming out. That is just confirming that whatever I typed in here, I do have access through the state because the set is properly working down here. Anyone need a minute? Yep, you got it. can usually tell by head movement, but I never really know. So thank you for confirming. And again, we should be looking over here. We can hit the login button and see our ABC or whatever we've typed into those form fields show up. That means that we are caught up and everything is working. Okay, anyone need help before we move on? Everyone good? All right. So we don't have to reach into the event target element's username value or reach into the document object model. Again, we wouldn't really want to do this in React anyway, because there are more React methods like state for accessing that data. So even though it seems like we did extra steps here to tie the value and the on change into the state values, the benefit of that is we get easier access to it up here. So what did we do? We did an if statement that said if the username is not max, alert wrong username. If the password is not equal to secret, get out. Otherwise, set the user as logged in and redirect them to the home page. Okay, well, we're going to keep these if statements the same, but we're going to try and make this a little bit more React friendly by setting up an error message and also using our location redirect hook to make sure that all of this is working. So I'm going to say if the username does not equal max, and again, this is a pretty insecure method, right? Anyone who loaded your web page could see these if statements, figure out what the password is, and go from there. We will be covering a full stack authentication method that is secure, that is not easy to bypass. We'll be using a library and a service called Clerk. And Ryan will be coming back in to teach that after we get some full stack experience in the next couple weeks. So not the most secure way of doing this, but hopefully more React practice for you of setting data, working with state, all of that good stuff. So if the username is not max, I could alert here, but alerts aren't the best user experience. Oftentimes they block the user from clicking anything else on the page. They prevent any of our other code from running. We don't have any control over them, right? Other than the message that shows up, we can't really make that message go away or do anything. So instead, I'm going to set a third variable into state. And let's call it error and set error, which is going to use state, and that one we're going to start out as null or empty. Then we are going to say, hey, if the username is not equal to max, set error and then we'll do the same for password. Love Emperor's New Groove, so let's get a little no touchy in there. And then else, we got to handle our redirect here. Okay, so let's test that out. I type in a username other than Max and I hit login, and I see it showing up here, but my error message doesn't show up. Like, okay, well, what happens if I type in Max and I don't type in a password? Again, no error message shows up. And if I do type in the right credentials, I get my redirect should happen now. So I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Does anyone know what step we missed to make our error message work as expected? So we're setting the error here. We have some text in there. We know this else statement is working because if we type in the right stuff, we do get the redirect should happen now. What do we need to do after we set data in state to make sure that it is viewable by the user?
A return.
In the return, we got to update it, right? So let's come down here to underneath our login button and we can add some style of red text and we can show the error message. And a reminder, style tags do have to be objects in React. They can't be strings, but inline text styles are actually not as discouraged in React code as they are in regular HTML and CSS code, because they're kind of powerful when they are objects. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I come up here, and now I get my no touchy that isn't the password. And if I take a letter out of my name and hit login, I get you aren't my user, get out. Okay, so I do have my username and password working. I've got my error showing up. And remember, it's important to go through this flow. We load the page. The value starts out as empty. The user types in some text. Every time they type in a letter, that sets username and updates the value. They type in their password. They click the submit button. That triggers the form submission, login form submitted. Login form submitted prevents the default. It checks to see if the username is not correct. If it isn't, it sets error. Error comes up here and updates the error value in state. The error value in state comes back down here, goes, oh, this error message is now updated. Show that error message in a p tag. And this looks a little bit nicer than the alert that pops up by default. So we got to handle our last thing, which is the redirect to the home page. Well, we got to do two things actually. In the vanilla JavaScript code, we set local storage logged in to yes. Local storage doesn't change at all, so we can reuse that in our React code. What we can't do, well, what we shouldn't do is this window.location redirect to new post. There is a more efficient way of using the React router to route us to another link on our website. So what we do is we import up here something called use navigate from React router dot. Before we can actually use the use navigate, we got to set up the navigate to use navigate. I know that that sounds really dumb, but we are going to say const navigate equals use navigate as a function. And then finally, down here, we're going to take out our console should redirect, and instead we say navigate to new post. Yes, I am aware that it's kind of dumb that it takes 3 lines of code to pull and navigate and then be able to use it, but that is how we sometimes have to get around React providing us functionality that we can hook into. And that's all a hook is, right? Don't overthink it. Anything that starts with use is a hook in React, usually a hook in React. And all that is doing is they're saying, hey, there's some functionality that React or an NPM package provides to us. You actually can make your own hooks down the road, but we are provided some functionality. All we're trying to do is hook into that functionality that's been provided to us. So I go ahead and save. I come back over. I type in my username and my top secret password. I hit the login button, and I should be taken to the new post page. Let's pause there for a split second. Read through everything on the login page. Could you describe what each line of code is doing? I'm actually not going to go through and comment this tonight. So take a moment, read through this, go, all right, I know the order that we did these steps. That order makes sense, right? Because we had to get the stuff showing up, and we had to make the functionality work, then we had to take you to another page. All right, all of that makes sense. But if I were a novice coming into this, never reading this code before, could I explain what every line of code is doing on this page? If you can't, now is the time to be asking questions about it. Everyone good? You need another minute to read. All right, we're going to keep rolling then. So we've made it to the new post page. We do need to do a check though, because what happens if I am not signed in? So before we work on the new post page, let's get the home page working. Going to make it a little bit easier for us to test. So I'm going to delete out my new post from my URL and go back to my home page. And now I've got a problem because my login link is showing, but I'm already logged in. So we need to get clever on what link we're going to show there. Are we going to show the login link, or are we going to show the new post link if the person is already logged in? Well, this is where React is really going to help us out, because in vanilla JavaScript, we'd have to attach a new script. We would have to check local storage to see if the user was logged in. We'd have to write an if statement to check if they were logged in. Then if they were logged in, we would have to generate an A tag and make that A tag show up with document.getElement by ID. And if they weren't logged in, we'd have to write an else statement to say show the login button instead. Well, here's the cool part about React. We can do that all in one line of code. It's going to be a really long line of code, but it's all doable in a single line of code. Let's look at that. In my home.js, I'm going to put a curly brace on either side of my link tag. And I'm going to say, hey, go to Window, Local Storage, and get the item called logged in. And if that is equal to the word yes, show a link tag to new post. Otherwise, show a link tag to logged in. I realize that wrapped onto 3 lines of code, but the general flow is there. Again, this is a ternary operator, an inline if statement. If this thing is true, go show what is ever between the question mark and the colon. If it is not true, show this thing instead. I'm going to go ahead and save that, and what I should see is the new post button. Problem with all of this is that while it's great, I can now create a new post, I can't log out. I've logged in, there's no log out button. So you would think it would be something as simple as saying, hey, let's make a span tag that says log out. And you can instantly see React is now mad at me. Got red squigglies everywhere. I'm like, what did I do? I made it angry. Well, it turns out that inline if statements, those ternary operators, only like to return one thing. And that's a very common thing in React. React doesn't like working with a bunch of individual elements. It wants a group of elements. And in a JavaScript, we could do that in an array. But arrays are kind of weird in HTML, right? It would feel weird to put square braces around those and separate them out with a comma. So React has this thing called a fragment. And a fragment you can think about as like a div tag, except it doesn't have to be a div. So what we do is we create an opening tag and a closing tag that doesn't have a name inside of it. It's literally just opening and closing arrows, and then opening a slash and the closing arrow. This is called a fragment in React. And a fragment in React is basically just saying, hey, we would like you to return multiple elements here. We just don't want to put those elements inside a div. You could put them in a div and everything would work perfectly fine here, but there are times that a div is actually going to screw up the CSS. And so this fragment is basically a way of returning a couple elements without confusing React when React has requirements that one and only one element comes out. So kind of weird to see an opening tag without a name inside of it, but that's all a fragment is grouping those together. Weird quirk of JSX syntax. Okay, in this span tag here, you know what? Let's do a space and a line and another space. Just so it looks like those links are separated. And then we can style our span tag. Let's do a color of blue and a text decoration of underline. I wonder if that's light blue. Let's see if I can match that better. Light blue. No, it's not light blue. I'm going to leave it as blue for now. Okay, now inside of there, I need to make my login button work. So before we have seen a like in post preview, all we've done is links there. Okay, what we can do, we have 2 options. In our login form, we did an on submit here, right? And we tied this on submit to an entire function up here. And that makes sense because this function obviously was several lines of code, right? We wanted to abstract that out and say the logic goes up at the top, the HTML goes down at the bottom. But React does let us do inline events. And we generally want to avoid those inline functions if they're going to be more than a couple lines. But because this is going to be pretty quick, we can fix this by saying, hey, I want to go to the homepage. And in my log out button, I'm going to throw an on click in there. And the on click is going to trigger a function. And the function is going to say window dot local storage dot set item logged in to no. So I save that. I come over here, I refresh. I click my logout button, and it doesn't look like anything happened. Like, well, that's annoying. If I refresh the page, however, all of a sudden it goes, oh, you're logged out. Does anyone know why this logout isn't working the way we expect?
What is the current behavior?
Current behavior is if we log in and we have a successful login, and it takes us to the new post page. We go back to the home page. It shows us new post and log out. That's what we expect, right? Because we are logged in. So show the log out button, show the new post link. But if I click log out, it doesn't look like anything happened until I refresh the page. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're logged out.
Oh, does it have to do with the way state renders? They're
It
calling use effect.
It does. So we are getting really used to state being this magical thing in React, right? Whenever we set state, it automatically is updating in the page and just keeping all of our data in sync. But that state, that's a very special variable. Window local storage is just another regular variable. When those values update, it does not update the page automatically for us. So even though it is properly logging us out, it is not causing the page to realize that we are now logged out. So there will be a slightly different solution of how Ryan teaches to get this to reflect and integrate it into state. For now, I'm going to do something kind of hacky because I forget how I fixed this last time. I'm going to just try this. Don't follow me quite yet. I don't know if this will actually work. No, boo. Okay. So I'm going to do something a little hacky now, knowing that only down the road the right solution is what Ryan is going to teach. So in here, because we aren't triggering a state update by setting logged in to false, think about this. Yeah, this is the best way I can think to do it. We are going to force the page to reload. And I will leave a note in here, and this is a good practice, right? I'm going to leave my initials here because chances are people will know, whoever's working on this project, they'll know the other developer's initials. I'm also going to leave the date in here because oftentimes we forget when's the last time that we worked on this code. And then I will leave myself a note of why I put this window.location in here and why it's a bad case. So I'll say this window location triggers the page to reload. This is required because updating local storage does not cause the page to re-render, which would show the user they are now logged out.
Couldn't you also just make a new
You
state
could make a new
variable
variable in state,
and just
and
keep updating it with just random
with
nonsense?
random, or the other way to do it is with a timestamp. And the timestamp's a good one because you can easily pull that date, and then when you just set it in, it causes a refresh. That's another alternative. But it is somewhat common to see this. Or the other thing that a lot of websites will do is when you hit the logout button, they'll take you to the login screen, right? Of, hey, you just logged out, redirect you to login in case you want to get back in. And that would also solve this problem. So it really comes down to user experience of what would you like to happen. And then you just need to get creative there with that. The proper UX would probably be to do a use effect when the page first loads, pull the data out of local storage and set it into state. Then when you click the logout button, clear the local storage, but then set the variable in state to logged out. And that's what would cause the page to re-render and show the right information. And then you would base this ternary operator off the state instead of basing it off of the local storage.
Is that just to have a more, I guess, formal trail of data there, so you don't like go through years later or something? Go, what's this variable for?
Yeah, it's basically saying I'm going to get around state. I'm going to get around local storage not being reactive to updates by copying it into state. And that's a little less hacky than the timestamp solution. But lots of options for you there. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to refresh. I'm going to log in. I'm going to type in my username and my password. I'm going to log in. I'm going to go back to my homepage. That shows me my new post and my log out. I'm going to hit the logout button. That does now show me the login button, and I should be good to go there. Does anyone not have that flow working, or does anyone have questions as to why this is required?
I got a question, but it's unrelated to why
Yeah,
it's required.
that's fine.
Can you remind me what the like the empty alligator brackets are above the link and
Yeah,
how it's
so
closed?
if we take these out, alligator brackets, love the name. Um, turns out that React, in some circumstances, doesn't like returning two elements that are unrelated, right? So in this case, we're having this if statement, and React JSX is weird and is like, I don't know how to return both a link and a span unless those link or spans are grouped together. So what we could do is throw this in a div, and we could throw it in a closing div down here and reacts back to normal and happy. But divs sometimes mean things in our CSS, right? In our CSS, we may be saying target a div with this specific ID, or we may say target a div that's nested in a div in another div. So React is like, well, sometimes we want to just group things together, but we don't want to group them in another HTML element. And so the people at React were like, oh, that makes sense. Like sometimes you don't want another div in your page. You just want two things to show up, but that's not valid JSX. So what they came up with was what they call a fragment. So instead of putting it in a div, which makes JSX happy, instead what you can do is put it in empty alligator brackets, or basically make a new element that doesn't have a name, and that makes JSX happy. And then also in the browser tells the browser, hey, this isn't in another div, but it's just JSX syntax to make JSX happy.
Thank you. Oh, I have another question.
Shoot.
In your line 71, can you explain why you did the empty string in the brackets again? And
Yeah,
the
really
straight
good
bar?
question. So if I take this out and save, and then log back in just so you can see it. Apparently I can't type my name tonight. And go back to the home page, you'll see that the like that vertical bar is right up against the logout button. And if
Oh,
I come back in here and put a space in and save it, Prettier is like, no space for you there. That is because, and even if I move the span tag up here, Prettier, I think, will know what I'm going for and put it in for me. And that's because HTML doesn't treat white spaces particularly well. It will let you have a space between two items, but it won't let you have a trailing space between that item and another thing. So in React, you can get around that by putting in basically a JavaScript space, right? The curly braces telling React switch to JavaScript and then an empty string. And this would actually let me put in multiple spaces. Okay, no, it won't. But it's converting it into JavaScript to let me get around that. In vanilla HTML, we could put in what we call a non-breaking space character, and that would achieve the exact same thing. This is just a little uglier than JavaScript, so you can use either one of them, but they do the exact same thing. So that curly brace, quote, space, closing quote, closing curly brace is the exact same thing as an NBSP in HTML land.
thank you.
And then I'm going to also paste in the documentation for React fragment just to get you guys exposed to reading the documentation. This is one of those things that once you know what it's called, it becomes much easier to understand the documentation for it, right? So as your careers progress, I want to encourage you guys to read documentation. Again, you got to know what the name of it is. And I encourage you guys to ask questions about it. But once you know what it is, now you can start reading the documentation, understanding the way I described it a little bit better, understanding what they're trying to describe a little bit better. But in essence, it just says the fragment syntax lets you group elements without a wrapper, right? So you're basically able to return two things without putting them in a div. And then it goes on to get really technical. But they show you if you wanted to return a post that had the post title and a post body without this fragment right here, React would get confused and it would be like you're trying to return multiple things that aren't grouped together. And so that fragment just says without putting in another div, we are able to return multiple things. That's all a fragment is. All right, how are we feeling? Are we feeling like we're making progress? Are we feeling like this is sinking in? Feeling like we're sick of the blog project and want to go back to chat tomorrow? Because I know how to order things. Apparently I zero indexed on the chat project and forgot about that. Okay. Where are we headed next? I'm going to hit the logout button. That is indeed going to log me out of the site. I am then going to go up to my URL and sneak into the new post page and look at what loads for me. I'm logged out, and I know I'm logged out because if I go to the home page, it shows me the login button. I shouldn't be able to get to this page without being logged in. I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes. See if you can fix this on your own. In the new post page, see if you can make it so that if you are not logged in, it will take you back to the home page instead of letting you see the new post page. So I will review at 6:36 how to do this. You are going to need a couple React concepts. You're going to need that use navigate that we've used before and is already in new post. You're going to need to think about, hey, when a React component first shows up, what function do we use in order to hook into that functionality to say when the page first loads? And then what do we need to do inside of that thing to redirect them to the home page if and only if they are not logged in? I will review that all at 6:37. So you guys have 5 minutes to practice on that. Okay, so what's the problem? I'm on the home page, and if I sneakily go to the new post page, I run into a problem that I can access this without being logged in. So the somewhat naive approach to this, and we're going to do 3 solutions, all to get the problem solved, but a little differently. The first thing that we do is we come in here and I go, all right, I'm going to just at the top of the page, I'm going to do a check. I'm going to say if window.local storage.get item logged in does not equal the word yes, throw them back to the home page. And at first glance, this works. If I go to the new post page and hit enter, it immediately takes me back to the home page. And I'm like, all right, I'm feeling pretty good about that. That's fine. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to throw a console log up at the top here that says checking to see if signed in. So I go to my new post page, it flashes in the console for a second and takes me back to the home page. But let's see what else happens. If I do log in, takes me to new post and doesn't redirect me. What shows up in the console? It shows checking to see if signed in. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Page loaded. I was signed in. I'm good to go. This is level 1 of 3 of the best solutions for React. Because what happens is every time that's not doing what I thought I was going to do. Oh, because we didn't make it a controlled input. Okay. The problem with this is if these were linked to state, the state would be updating every time I type a letter in. Let me show you that hypothetically. So let's say we link our content, our title, and our set title to use state. And I come down here, right? This is the React way to do it. I go to the input. I say the value is my title, and the on change is my title, is a event that sets my title to the event target value. And I import my use state. Now I'm in here, and every time I type a letter, it's saying checking to see if you're signed in. Well, that's not what we want. Why is it doing that? That's because every time this on change runs down here to update the state, it is also rerunning all of this code up here. We don't want it to do that. We want to let React be able to update the state and re-render the component as frequently as it wants. That's one of the benefits of React, right? Is that we can set these variables into state and they magically just show up. They magically just re-render. That's kind of a problem. And so what we need to do is say, hey, this code should only run when the page first loads. In order to do that, we're going to put this entire thing in a use effect. Our use effect is going to come out with an empty array. Now, if we are in here and make sure we import our use effect and refresh, now it logs out checking to see if we are signed in when the component first loads. But as I type things into this title, it's not continuing to check to see if I'm signed in. It's only doing it if I am actually loading the page for the first time. So whenever we load a page for the first time, for example, if we want to pull in the API data, super, super important that we use a use effect instead. The third thing, did anyone catch what is wrong with this code? We're using this window.location. And we want to avoid that in our React apps because it's bypassing the React router. We already have set up our navigate here. So because we already imported our use navigate and have access to the navigate function, instead of doing our window.location, which causes the whole page to reload and the whole React app to go back out to the internet, grab the entire React app and make it show up, instead, we should use the navigate function. And that will, if we are signed out, take us right back to the homepage without any delay in the internet of having to reload that page. So three solutions there. We have to do our if statement out of local storage no matter what. We should wrap it in a use effect to prevent any re-renders of the page from causing it to go back to local storage a bunch of times. And finally, we should be using the navigate function that comes out of the React router DOM. Pausing there for questions. Compare that to your approach. Does anyone have questions? Okay. This pretty much completes the blog project. So I'm going to leave it up to you guys. We can either go back to the chat application tonight and finish that up, or we could add additional features into this blog. So we could make an edit button work. We could make we could add a delete button, or we could get creative and maybe add an API call in here, or we could go back to chat and finish all of that up. So I'm going to leave that up to you guys. Let me start a poll. There's a question, were those the three easiest ways to approach that problem? I can't think of any easier way to do it. You got to check storage to see if they're logged in or not, and you got to redirect them, right? The only complication that we really added to that was it's more efficient to redirect them through the router than it is through the browser. And then we want to be careful in putting any code that is not a hook and not a function inside our React components because they will run more frequently than we anticipate. And so that's why the use effect is important there. Um, okay. Poll is launched. We can either get edit and delete working in blog. We can switch over to finishing out chat. If we don't finish out chat tonight, we will finish chat tomorrow. Or if you have any other ideas in blog, you can vote for that third option. 9 out of 12 voted in. Going once. Going twice. Okay. Seems like you guys are just narrowly voting for edit and delete and blog, which I think is a slightly better option, only because you may need to do that in your capstones, right? You may need to be able to edit and update from there. And then we always have tomorrow to finish out chat as well. So let's do attendance before I forget. The secret word tonight is edit post. EDIT space POST. You guys aren't going to like how complicated edit post is. So if you have been following along so far in code, I would highly encourage you guys to not follow along code side and just take notes instead. However, if you are feeling up to the challenge, I'm not going to go through at lightning speed. I'm not going to like do this at 1,000,000 miles an hour, but it does get a little bit more complicated. We're going to start with delete because delete is the slightly easier one. And then we will go over to edit, which is a little bit harder. So let's see if we can get delete done before the break. We are going to start with delete. If you want to follow along with me on delete, that's totally fine. Edit is just the one that gets a little bit trickier. Okay, let's dive in. I'm going to hit the read more button. And I do see my post, but oh, you know what I do want to do before I forget? Images are a little funky in React. So I want to show you guys how to do images. Let's do that before the break. So 2 ways of getting images to work. I'm going to go to Unsplash and I'm going to just find some image. Yeah, sure. A car works and a beach is second. That works fine. So 2 ways of getting images working. There are pros and cons to both. The more technically minded people will argue for you putting them in the SRC folder. The more network efficient minded people will argue for putting it in the public folder. As a professional senior software developer, I make the argument for putting it in the SRC folder. As a bootcamp instructor who is catering towards learning developers, I make the argument for the public folder. But it is very important to understand both of them because if you are reading anyone else's React code, they may do it one way or another. And so I'm going to show you both. The easier one first. We can take an image and put it into the public. No, not into node modules. Don't put it into node modules. We can put it into the public folder. When we put it into the public folder, I'm just going to rename this as public folder.
I don't know if you're sharing your screen or if it's just me.
No, it's not just you. Thank you for the reminder. I'm going to throw that into the public folder. The public folder is a special folder in React that basically lets you access anything inside of that with a regular image tag or over the internet. So if I go to my browser and go to my localhost 3000, I can type in public folder img.jpg and I can see my image. Because it's in the public folder, again, not in my SRC, not in the root, but actually in public, I can treat that just like a regular image. So on my homepage, I can go down here, I'll throw it inside my container, I'll do an image with a style width of 300 and an SRC equal to, and all I need to do is an empty slash. That empty slash React is treating as if it were in my public folder already. And I can throw my public folder image.jpg right in there. And just like any other image tag, if I go back to my home page, I can see my image show up. It helps if I'm not on the vanilla version and in the actual React code. So that's the kind of easy method of going, right? You could create a folder in public. We could do something called img and move the public folder image inside of there just to kind of keep them all grouped together. And then in our source path, we just say img slash and put the image in there. And that still works with no problems. So that is the short and sweet version. Any questions on that? Hopefully, not too confusing. Any files that we're trying to access, we put in public, and then the React server that's getting all of our code up makes it easy to access that. The other way of doing it is to grab that second image and put it in the SRC folder. I am also going to say new folder in my SRC, and I'll call that my images. I can put my car inside my images, and I will rename that to car.jpg. Now, the other way of doing it is a little different. We can use the import system. So I'm going to say import car photo from, and I can do a dot slash. The dot slash is saying based off of wherever this file is. So I'm starting in the SRC folder because home is in the SRC folder. Go into my images and grab the car.jpg. Now, whatever I called the import here, I can scroll down, and when I put another image in, again with a width of 300 pixels, I can do an SRC, but this time I'm going to put in curly braces. And those curly braces are saying, hold up, there's some JavaScript data coming in through here, and I'm going to throw my car photo in there. I save, I come over, and now I see my car photo right next to my beach photo. So these are two ways of importing photos. There are definitely pros and cons to both of them. Joe, when you import something, the only thing that has access to what you're importing is in that file. So you would have to, if you wanted to, you could import it in app, but then you would have to pass it down as a prop to home to get access to it. So it is generally advised that you import in the file that you need it. And JavaScript is smart enough to not import it multiple times. So it will, even though you may use that import use state in 10 different files, that doesn't mean that it's duplicating that use state function 10 different times. It is smart enough to say there are multiple files that are reusing that same import. So pros and cons to both of them, just wanted to expose you to them because that would be a very common technical interview question of like, what are the two different ways of importing files into React or photos into React? Both of those work perfectly fine.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
I was kidding at first, but now I'm wondering why not. For putting something in the root, not just a photo, but like any other files.
Yeah, so public and source are two very important directories. Source is going to be what React basically bundles or converts the JSX into regular JavaScript that can run in your browser when you go to deploy it. That's called the build and bundle process. Slightly different, but and when Nathan comes back in, he'll show you how to do that. The public folder is also special in that it is saying these are static assets, right? These aren't dynamic. They aren't changing. They're just an image or some HTML file or something like that. And what the build and bundle process will do is take those files and put them in the root of the built folder so that the web browser can access them. If they are outside of the SRC folder and outside of the public folder, the bundler won't know that they are JavaScript files and won't import them properly. So if you are doing any imports, they do have to be inside the SRC folder. That may be an oversimplification, but that is the level and extent that I understand how they work. And so I've always just treated them that way. Okay, let's go on break. When we come back from break, we will add in our delete button, and then we will add in the edit button and call it a night. Go on break, be back at 7:20. So where did we leave off? We left off. We've got our images showing. You see two different ways of getting those images to show, both one by putting it in the public folder and then using our image just like we usually do right here with on our homepage with our image tag. And then the SRC, we start out with that empty slash there. And then in the public folder, you can put things in a folder, a subfolder. You don't have to. But I put mine in a subfolder, and that empty slash, again, anything in the public folder, it will know that empty slash is looking in the public folder, and we make it show up that way. Or we can put images in the source folder. And if we put them in the source folder, we import them using the JavaScript ES6 module syntax, right? So the same way that we import components, we can import images. And then the only difference is if we import it that way, down here at the bottom in the src tag, instead of using quotes and providing a file path, instead we provide the src directly from whatever we imported up here, up at the top. Okay, where did we leave off? We want to
I
make
don't
it
think you're sharing your screen.
second time tonight, man. I'm on a roll. All right. So import if the image is in the source folder, and you are allowed to use subdirectories for both source and public. If you import it from the source folder, whatever you name the variable in the import, you have to use in the source down here with curly braces, or you can put images in the public folder and then use a path to them. If anyone tells you one way is wrong or one way is better than the other, there are pros and cons to both of them. So don't get hung up on either one. Whatever way makes more sense to you, I would say go ahead and use that method. Okay. Where did we leave off? We left off, if I'm in the read more screen, especially in the case where I have like a duplicate post, I want to be able to delete one of those posts. But I only want to be able to delete it if the user is signed in. So in order to be able to delete something, you got to give someone a window, right? Or an option to delete it. So I'm going to go in to one of my posts, and I'm going to borrow the same code that I used in my app.js, in my home.js. So my home.js has this window local storage get item. If they are signed in, we want to show them some links. So I'm going to borrow that, go into my read post, and then inside of my read post, I'm going to come down to the bottom of the container. We'll throw another header row in here. And then I'm going to say, hey, if the user is signed in, I want to show them something. Otherwise, I would like to show them something else. And the something else that I'd like to show them is actually nothing. And that may sound a little weird, but when we do a ternary operator, that inline if statement, we have to tell it what else we want them to show. And so in React, we will often use the null command to say we don't want to show them anything if this thing isn't true. If it is true, I would like to show them a span tag that has a style color of red that says delete. And if I go back to my home page, I am not signed in, so I don't see any links down at the bottom here. But if I am signed in and go back to my home page and pop open a post, I do see my delete button. We should do a little more styling on that. Let's say we'll do text decoration of underline, and we will do a cursor of pointer. All right, that feels a little bit better. Now, I got to think about this. Is this delete button going to be something that's just a 1 or 2 line piece of code, or is it going to be a lot of code behind it? In general, if you don't know one way or the other, lean towards making it its own separate named function. So I'm going to say on click of this post, delete post. Then I'm going to come back up to before my returns, and I'm going to say const delete post is going to equal some function. And whenever we are deleting anything, it's a good idea to give the user a confirmation. Hey, are you sure you want to delete this? Because there's no getting it back. So you could do a whole flow, right, where you show them something in the page, like yes or no buttons appear, and you can click on that. But there's a really nice feature built into the browser called window.confirm. And it's really similar to a window.alert in that it pops up. The only difference with the confirm is that it gives the user a yes or no button. And if they hit no, the entire function returns out false. So it will just ignore that if it's in an if statement. So we can say window.confirm, are you sure you want to delete this post? And we'll say yes, delete. And we will see what happens in the browser. So I hit the delete button, it says, are you sure you want to delete this post? If I hit cancel and pop open my console, you see there's nothing really in this. This is other code. But if I hit delete and hit OK, then I get a yes, delete. And you know what, while I'm thinking about this, I don't really love the look of a delete link, right? It's just text down there. Let's switch that out. I'm going to make that a button instead. And if I use a class name of that of BTN and BTN danger, I'll be able to take this stuff out, I think. I'm going to save, I'm going to refresh. There we go. Now that looks a little bit more actiony. So just switching out that button for a class name of BTN danger. And now I don't need that styling, and it looks a little bit more put together. Just a couple different options for you. Okay, I hit OK. I got my yes delete. Now I got to actually make that work. So I'm going to go back up to the top. Does anyone have any ideas of what steps it would take to delete this post?
Do you have to access it in the local storage first?
We sure do. So we're going to get all of our posts from local storage. I'm going to say const posts equals window local storage, get item posts, call it as JSON. Then we need to say const all posts is equal to our JSON.parse posts as JSON. And we'll make sure that's working. So we'll console log out all of our posts. I delete, I hit OK, and I get my array of all three of my posts. What would we do next?
We loop through those and try to find the one that matches.
Yep. So instead of using .find, which we used up here, I'm going to reuse this code, but I'm going to instead use find index instead, because find index does the exact same thing as find, but it's going to tell us what the index is of the item that we're trying to find. That's going to be more helpful when we try and delete that particular item from the array. I do have to be careful here, though. If I run this code, I get immediately posts is not defined. Well, posts isn't defined because I called it all posts, so I can update that there. And I think everything is fine, but if I test this and hit OK, well, let me do this. Let me console log out the matching post instead. So I hit delete, I hit OK, and I get 0. Well, let's test that. If I go to the second post and hit delete and hit OK, I get 1. So that is working, and it's working because we went all the way up here and we declared timestamp outside of this use effect. If timestamp was declared or made inside this use effect here, we wouldn't have access to it down here in the delete post because of scope. So remember, you can always reach outside to get access to a variable, but if that variable is declared inside somewhere else, we won't be able to get access to it. Okay, now that we have that, how do we go about using that index to delete it? This is where I always have to use documentation because there's slice and there's splice and there's shift and unshift and pop and push. And I can never remember anything other than push, which adds something to the end of the array. So I could go to MDN and go look that up, or I could ask the question in a much more natural way, which is how do I remove a specific index from an array in JavaScript? And ChatGPT tells me that I can use the splice method, and they show me that if I want to remove the index 2, which we have already found, we can myArray.splice it, and then whatever we console log out after that will show us those items. So I come back over here, and I say, hey, this really isn't giving me the matching post. This is giving me the matching post index. So we should be careful on our variable names. Then I'm going to go to all posts, and I'm going to splice, and then I'm going to go back over to ChatGPT and see, okay, I have to put the index to remove and then the number 1, because that's the number of indexes that it will remove. So if I wanted to remove 5 items starting at index 2, I would say 2, 5. But the most common use of splice is probably to remove just one of the items, right? So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to say splice the matching post index and go ahead and take one of those items out. And when I am done with that, I am going to navigate them. Did I not have my navigate in? No, I don't have my navigate in yet. Navigate them back to the home page. The problem is, in order for me to be able to use navigate, I have to import use navigate and say const navigate equals use navigate. Okay, so pretty good flow. Confirm to make sure that they want to delete it. Get all of the posts from storage, parse them out from the string to an array of objects, find the specific index based off of the timestamp from the URL. Remember, that timestamp is coming in from right here, and we're using the React router to get access to that. Then we are, after we find the index based off of the timestamp and the timestamp that's in the array, take that one item out of all posts and take us back to the home page. So I think everything is cool. I hit the OK button, and both of my posts are still there. Well, that's less than cool. Let me try it again. And they're all there. What is the last step we need to do before we take them back to the home page? State something that isn't the state. Where else are we storing data in this project? Local storage, you got it, right? Now, if we were storing it all in state, like if the new post form was on the homepage, then we could just update state, and you're right, everything would work. But all posts is basically a copy of what's in local storage at this point, right? So once we make the copy and make the modifications to that variable, we now need to update that variable in local storage. So I'm going to say window local storage, set item. And don't forget that local storage only takes a string. And so before we parse it here, we need to stringify it before we put it back into local storage. Otherwise, it puts object in local storage as a string, and obviously no one wants that. So I'm going to json.stringify our all posts, which has the splice of the posts that we deleted out of it. I save, I pop one open, I hit the delete button, I confirm. And just like that, our post is deleted. Okay, I'm gonna pause there, see if anyone has questions. There is our delete function. Everyone good? Anyone need another minute for this to sink in? Or have questions? Hopefully we're getting the flow of this, right? React set is really intimidating in the beginning because you've got state, you've got this new syntax going on. You're combining your HTML and your JavaScript. There's a lot going on, right? But hopefully we're starting to see, hey, you know, these web apps are kind of similar, right? We got to deal with the variables up at the top. We got to have some events that are going to happen when the user interacts with the page. We got to be aware of the data that's going to change that we're showing to the end user. And then ultimately, we're going to return something out that's based off of that state, right? Or based off of some data that's loading in. And that's really all this web app is. Yeah, we got props going on, passing data around. Yeah, we've got, use effect that changes things up a little bit. But for the most part, hopefully we're starting to see some patterns here of all of this repeating. Okay, let's get our edit working. So oftentimes we can reuse our new post as a starting point for the edit. We are going to do that, but we're going to make some pretty serious modifications to our new post. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file called editpost.js. And I'm going to take my new post and borrow everything that is in my new post, but I'm going to rename this to edit post and edit post. Then I got to have a way to tell it which one I'd like to edit. I could do this if I was logged in. I could put an edit button here, but we already have buttons going on in here. So I think I'll put the edit button here instead. So I'm going to go to my read post page. I'm going to go down to where I have my buttons. And before my delete button, I'll add another button that says edit. And I will link that to my edit post page. So I'm going to surround the whole thing in a link to edit post. So we have now seen two different ways that we can navigate around. We can do something in an on-click and use the navigate function here, which uses the React router, or we can use the link tag, which also gets imported from React router to take them to an entirely separate different page. So I click edit and I get 404 not found. Well, remember, the router doesn't assume every new component that we create is going to be its own page. So what we need to do is go all the way back up to our app.js, import our edit post, and then set up a new page for that with a path of edit post and an element of edit post as well. I save, I come over, I refresh, and now I have a page that says new post, but it looks like I'm on the edit post page. Well, in fact, I actually am on the edit post page. It's because I copied and pasted my whole new post page, right? So I'm going to say edit post instead. Now I'm on the right page. Okay, so user experience wise, I'm logged in. I hit the read more button. I see my post content. I hit the edit button, and now I get to this. What UX wise should we be doing before we let the user edit the post?
See what was already there?
Yep. And Austin said it in chat too. Yeah, you're both right. Filling in the fields with what was inputted before, right? The problem is we're on the edit post page. How do I know which one they click the edit button on? Well, how do we fix that in the read page? We used params, right? What we did all the way back up in the home page is we said, hey, instead of taking them just to the, oh, in post preview, actually. Instead of just taking them to read, take them to read, but include the details of whatever timestamp they're clicking on. So we need to do that in the read post page as well. In read post, when we send them to edit, we're actually going to send them instead to a template literal that says edit post, but we're going to include the timestamp. Whoa, 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 where's timestamp coming from? Timestamp is coming all the way up from our use params up here. So we are taking the parameter of the timestamp on this read page, dumping it into the link, and we can actually even see that we're dumping it into the link because if we go into edit, we can see that href now has the entire timestamp included in it. So if we click the edit button, now we get to edit post, and I went, son of a biscuit, where did my edit post page go? I was just on that. Well, we have to tell the app when you go to edit post, just like when you go to the read page, you are going to get a timestamp as part of the URL path. So we have to do the same thing here. We have to say, heads up, you are going to get a timestamp when you go to the edit post page. So I save that, I come over, I refresh. Now I've got my edit post page back. I've got my timestamp. Now I'm starting to get ready to fill in that form field. I'm going to pause there just for a second in case anyone is following along with the faster speed or has questions about the steps that we're doing or just wants me to repeat the steps. Hopefully we're looking at these steps and going, all right, the order, there are a lot of them, but hopefully the order is making sense, right? We got to put a button in. We got to get the new component set up. We got to make it a page. We've got to tell that link what one we're trying to edit. We've got to update the route to take the timestamp parameter, and then we're good to start making that functionality change a little bit. Okay. Anyone need a minute? Anyone have questions? All right. So now we got to go into our edit posts and we got to do things a little differently in here. So we have a use effect that's checking to make sure that they're signed in. And if they're not signed in, we take them back to the home page. That's actually probably good. Then we have our create post, and we know we're going to have to edit the create post, but that's not our objective right now. Our objective right now isn't to change the create post to an edit post. The goal is to get these form fields filled in with what post got selected. So I come down here and I jump right into my return. I'm like, well, that's no good. What I need to do is use this timestamp to pull things out from local storage. But when I'm pulling them all out from local storage, I only want to get the one post that I care about. Huh. That sounds familiar. I feel like we did that somewhere. Let's look at the read post page. And in the read post page, we do the work to get the item out of local storage, to parse it all out, to use the timestamp, and to return the matching post. Well, I could copy all of this code, but it sounds like this is something we're starting to do kind of a lot, and it would be nice if we could move this into a helper function that we could just put in one file and be able to access in two places. Now we're getting into refactoring a little bit, right? We're saying, hey, instead of just copying and pasting this code somewhere, we should dry out the code, don't repeat yourself. So we're going to do that. We're going to create a new folder inside our SRC called lib. LIB is short for library, right? And oftentimes when we create anything that we use multiple times, we put it in a folder called library. So inside our lib, we're going to create a new file, and we will call it get individual post.js. Now, inside of that, this isn't going to be any React. All this is going to be is a function that we use imports and exports to be able to get access to. So I'm going to say const get individual post is equal to some function. Then I'm going to go into my read post and cut this code out. I'm going to go over to my get individual post and paste that in. And now I need to be careful here, because window local storage, I can get access to that anywhere in the browser. So that's not a problem. But this timestamp isn't defined anywhere. This timestamp is specific to the read post page where we get access to the timestamp here. So what I'm going to do in my get individual post is grab the timestamp as a parameter. Basically, when we call this function, in order for this function to know how to run, we need to send in the timestamp information. Then, once we get the matching post, we need to give whatever is calling this function access to it. So we are going to return the matching post. And I will go through this flow visually so we can kind of connect all the dots. Finally, I need to export this function so I can get access to it in other places. So I go back to my read post, and now I'm going to say const matching post is equal to get individual post and pass in the timestamp. And I will just take this console log out. And now if we go back to our read page, it all looks the same. So that means we didn't break anything. And whenever we're refactoring, we take a pause and we say, did we break this in a refactor? We didn't. Now we can go use it somewhere else, but we want to make sure we understand the flow of this first. So let me do a quick review of that. Okay. We start with our use effect. Our use effect now comes in and goes, oh, you would like to get an individual post. Where does get individual post come from? That comes from this import here. This import is coming from this get individual post file here. That get individual post file is this down here. The reason why we can import this is because we are exporting it down here. So in order to be able to import our own functions, we have to be able to export them in that file. Okay, now what happens? We have linked through our imports our get individual post to our get individual post here. However, individual post needs access to the timestamp. Where is the timestamp coming from? It's coming from timestamp in here. Of course, I spelled individual wrong. I knew I spelled individual wrong. Just seeing if you were going to catch me. I still don't understand why code editors don't have a spell checker built into them. I mean, VS Code does, but it kind of sucks. Anyway, I'll fix it in a second. Now I get my timestamp from here. Where's my timestamp coming from? My timestamp is coming from my used params. Where's my used params coming from? That's coming from my router. So what we're ultimately doing here is moving the timestamp through to get individual post, which is getting access to the timestamp here. Now we do these lines of code and ultimately find the matching post that we send into the return. Now, whatever comes out of this return is going to go into the matching post right here. And Joe, before you ask, this doesn't have to be called matching post, and this doesn't have to be called matching post. This has to match whatever this is, and then you can name this whatever you want. In the vid. Now, see, now I've seen it and I can't type it right. In the visual. That looks better. Okay. I still probably spelled wrong, but it's slightly better. Okay. Everyone good on this refactor, seeing how we can start to move code out into their own functions, import, export them. Why did we do all of this in the first place? Well, this just seemed to complicate read post, but what it did make it easier for us to do is in edit post, we can go all the way up to this use effect and say, hey, as long as the user is logged in, we still need to get the timestamp from using the params in the route. But once we get that timestamp, we can say the matching post is equal to get individual post based off of the timestamp. And if we console log that matching post out and take a look in our console and are on the edit page, we see that matching post come out right away. So we are now seeing, hey, when we refactor our code, we can use this function in two separate places. As long as we export it here, we can import it up here and then use that function in different places, different components, different files, all of that. So that's a really helpful way of creating a reusable function, or what we sometimes call a helper function placed into a library. Any questions on refactoring that?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So in get individual posts, you don't have to use the use param timestamp because it's already being imported onto the page that has that syntax.
Yes. So it might get a little confused if we put the use params right inside get individual post, because get individual post isn't in the component that has access to the route. And so what we do instead is, you hit the nail on the head, you're correct. Because we do the use params in the component itself, we now have access to timestamp, which is just a string. So we take that string and send it into get individual post as an argument that lines up with this parameter.
Okay.
So yes, you are correct, but because we did the use params here and get access to it in this spot, we're able to send it in to get individual posts, get access to it, and then return out the matching post. I'm pretty sure this will break, but we could try it. Yeah, so we get this error if we try to do that. And it says React hook use params is called in a function, get individual post. Yeah, that is neither a React function nor a custom React hook function. React component names must start with an uppercase, blah, 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 blah. So basically, because this is a regular JavaScript function, React is now cranky with us that we tried to use params because use params is specific to React. And so we do have to leave that timestamp up in the function itself, and then we can pass it in down here, and that makes React happy again. Very good question. Any other questions? Okay. Let's finish this form out then. So in my edit post, I now have the matching post. I should set that data into the state, right? Because once I have the matching post, I want to display that user to the data, that data to the user. Got it. Okay. I'm going to take this title out because we're going to do the title a little differently, like the other form fields. I'm going to say const post and set post is equal to a use state. And we'll start that out as null. Now I'm going to come in here in my use effect, and I'm going to, I'll keep logging it, but I'm going to say set post to whatever our matching post is. The problem is if I come down here to my edit post and just throw a post.title and on this, just comment that out for now, I'm going to get an error. Cannot read properties null reading title. How do we fix that error, or what is that error trying to tell us? We're accessing post.title right here. Why aren't we able to do that? We are setting the matching post in, and then all we're trying to do is access the title of that post. You've seen this before. We are doing it in the use effect. The use effect is what is setting the post. My hint is order. When does this use effect run? So we don't want to forget about the order of our components, right? Because the computer always executes in a very specific order. So we go into edit post, it matches the route, it goes, this is the component for you. It comes in and it sets up our data, right? Our params, our use navigate, it gets all of our hooks ready for us to use, and it starts post out as null. Then it goes, hey, this use effect will run only after the page shows up for the first time. Okay, create post, that's some function, that's some event. We'll wait for that to be called. Then we come all the way down to the return here, and it goes, oh, you would like me to access the post title. We haven't loaded the post title yet, though. the post title does not show up until we set the post in. This use effect does not run until the page shows up for the first time. So what we need to do is come down and before it does this return, say if there is not a post loaded into state yet, return a p tag that says loading. Now we've modified the order that this code runs. Still does our hooks, still starts post out as empty, still says once the page first loads, go do this use effect, still ignores the create post, still comes down to here, but now instead of hitting this return, instead it's going to say, well, there's not a post loaded yet. So show the loading text. Ignore all of this stuff. Once all of this stuff is ignored, we go back up to our use effect. We go in, we load in the post, we set it into state. Setting it into state updates the post here. The post now goes back down to our return. Our if statement does not catch if there's not a post because the post is now loaded. And finally, it will show us this return with the form. So we're able to finish this out. The values are all going to be coming from the post. And the on changes are going to set post, but we need to be careful here because post is now an object. That object has the title, the author, and the content all in it. So what we do instead of just setting it to event target value, we say set it equal to a copy of the post. Spread out whatever the values of the post currently are, but then set the title to the event target value. And do that for the content. Oops. And for the author. And we get our A, B, C loading in. We go back, pop open the other one. We click edit on that one, and we get those three fields loading in as well. I'm going to pause here because I know this is super boring, but these are what we call our create, read, update, delete activities, right? I can tell you, I can pick any one of your capstones off the top of my head and tell you 4 operations that you're going to need to create, read, update, and delete on, right? So it's important to think through all of these little intricacies because I can't tell you the number of times I've sent something out to production and my boss is like, this is great, and has created all these different things. And he goes, Max, how do I delete one of those things? And I'm like, oh, I didn't put in a delete button, did I? This is why web apps are so complex. And React's trying to help us out here, right? They're saying, hey, if you pull this data into state and link it up to these form fields properly, we'll keep all of that data up to date for you. But we're seeing complexities come in here. Now, for the first time, we're seeing post, but post in state is not just a string. We're not creating 3 separate variables in the string. Instead, what we're doing is setting the entire object into state. Then we are able to access that using the key of title and updating just that key into the state. So a slightly different flow here. Review this on the live share while I cry as to why Joe broke React again.
Well, well, well. React thought they could hide from me. Nope. All right, let's see what happened here. I was wondering what was going on with mine, so I copied. I should have like the most up-to-date version of your code. in here
Okay.
that I just copy and pasted over. So I'm gonna pull up. Go back real quick. So. All right, let me get in here. Oh, is it gonna work now? Now that I'm. Okay, of course, it's fine, whatever.
Just needed me to watch it. Pretty sure they call that mechanic syndrome, but. Okay, let's finish this off. We have all of our content showing up here. The good news is the create post gets a little simpler. So instead of create posts, I am on my edit page after all. So I'm going to change that to edit. Then I'm going to come up here and change this to edit post. And then we still need to prevent default, but now I don't actually care about my form. So we can actually simplify some of this. We do still need to get all the existing posts. We still, we don't need to handle if there aren't any posts because we're already editing a post. For editing a post, there has to be at least one post that exists. So we can take all of this out and just set our posts equal to our JSON parse. Then instead of putting all of the posts in a new object, we already have the post hanging out up here in our state that is the most up to date because we linked it to our on changes down here. So we don't need this object anymore. What we can't do, though, is just push the post onto the end of the array. Because if we push it onto the end of the array, we would still have the original copy of the post, but then we would also have the edited copy pushed on at the end, and we don't want that. So instead, what we need to do is say existing post index. That's spelled wrong, isn't it? Existing, maybe not, is equal to our posts dot find index, where the search post we are looking for has the same timestamp as our parsed int timestamp. Then we can go to our posts and set whatever the existing post index is equal to our updated post from state. Finally, we need to still stringify it, put it in post as string, and then set the item in and take them back to the home page. Yeah, I didn't think it had another I in it. Eventually, apparently, okay. All right. So we modified our edit post. We still get the items out of local storage. We still parse them out of local storage. Now we need to know, hey, out of all of those posts, which is the specific post that we're updating? We need to know the index of that post in the array. So go loop through all of the different posts. Compare that to the timestamp that's coming from our URL of the params from the router. Take whatever that post index is and override whatever is in that index with whatever is in our post. What is in our post? Our post is what is in state. Our state is what is linked to our controlled inputs down in the edit form. Finally, stringify our posts and set them back into local storage. And if all of that works, we can come in here and say, thank God this project is over. And hit Oh, that should say edit post, but we'll leave it as create for now. And just like that, our content is now up to date. We'll fix that button really quick. That will bother me. Okay. I know that that was fast, but I'm hoping that this is a good code baseline. So as you guys are working in on your capstone, that is due, your capstone isn't due. Your next check-in is next Thursday, right? You don't have to have all of this functionality working, but I would love to see some of your data in state. That is a requirement. And I would love to see you excited about being able to work with some of that data in state, showing that data in reusable components using props, being able to update some of that data in a form, having a delete button work, having a read more or view details or something like that working. Hopefully this is getting some juices flowing for your capstone. So I know this went a little fast, but I'm hoping that this is just like okay, yeah, this makes sense. This makes sense, right? It's not something that I'm saying you need to code out tomorrow, but I'm hoping that the flow is starting to click a little bit more in terms of get it to show up, deal with the state, link the state to the inputs, handle any events. We're done with this page, on to the next component. So I will leave this up on the screen in case anyone has questions about the edit post. The comments are a little off just because of modifying it, but read through this, see if you have any questions.
Would just like to point out for anybody who's not doing it, I've made it a point to intentionally sit down for a few hours on the weekend and just go through the projects that we did throughout the week. Helps quite a bit.
Except on the weekend, you don't have to have me shouting in your ear about all the different concepts. So I'm sure it's much more pleasurable. All the code is in GitHub too, right? Day by day. Because when we get to these big projects, if you start on Saturday with the finished code, it can be really overwhelming, right? And so going through GitHub and going, all right, let me just make sure I understand day one. Let me see what code we added in there. Let me trace through the numbers, make sure I understand that. It becomes much easier to let this content really sink in. Before I forget, I am going to throw this up on GitHub.
I do have a kind of obscure question.
Shoot.
For a project like this, exactly how we have it laid out, what would you say would be like if you assigned this to one of us at the skill level that we're at right now, how long would you expect this to take us? Coming up with everything on our own.
A week and a half. It depends. It depends how what your learning style is. Let me put it like that, right? Because I'm sure you could go on YouTube and say React blog project and find someone who made something similar to this, but they may spend a lot more time on making it look pretty and using bootstrap components and, styling it all out, but then it may not be functional in terms of actually using local storage, being able to edit a post, having the form populate, all of that kind of stuff, right? Or you may be able to find someone who has made a blog post, but it's all full stack, at which point you're like, oh, well, now I've got to do additional work to understand what their full stack is doing enough that I can find an alternative for it. So some people learn really well only if the project is exactly what they need, right? Other people may say, oh, well, I've got a list of all of these React concepts and I've got a vague idea of what my blog needs to do. I can kind of piece things together from scratch as opposed to following someone else's tutorial. So one thing you could do is if this is not syncing in for you, right? What you could do is say, all right, I'm going to spin up Max's version of the code, right? I'm going to copy it in, I'm going to get it running, and then I'm going to go through page by page and come up with a requirements list. The home page has to show all of the posts that have been created. It needs to have a read more button. It needs to have a login link, and it needs to have a new post button, right? And so you write out those requirements and you move on to the next page. Okay, the login page needs to check to make sure that the username and password are entered right. If it is, it takes me to the new post page. If it doesn't, it shows an error message, right? And you start building out those requirements. Once you have that requirements list, that's when you start going, all right, homepage makes the most sense. Let me get my project set up. Let me do my router. Let me go from there, right? So everyone approaches this product or this project a little differently, and that's okay, right? That is totally fine. But you want to be able to say, hey, am I able to build something like this? And maybe it isn't a blog post or a blog project. Maybe you go, I'm going to start my to-do list in this, right? Or I'm going to keep track of plants and I can click the view more button and get details about the plant showing up, right? You don't want to go too heavy on local storage because we are going to replace local storage with our own APIs, right? With our databases that are much more robust, that we can share those endpoints across the internet and have users be able to pull in that data. So I wouldn't go overboard with local storage. It's okay to just have the data in state. But I would say that this is a project where if you didn't follow the video and didn't have my code, but had a solid list of 20-ish requirements, I would expect this to get done by a beginner React developer in a week to 2 weeks, let me say, depending on where you are with your React, previous JavaScript experience, all of that kind of stuff. Following along with the project, having my copy of the code, I would hope that you could get that done in 3 to 6 hours, right? Depending on if you're going for a code heavy approach or a video heavy approach. But if you can get that video up to 1.5 or 2x speed, thinking that we did this over 3 days, knowing that you can skip certain parts of it, knowing that the video is only 2 hours and 20 minutes as opposed to the 3-4 hours of class time for breaks and getting class started and all of that kind of stuff, I would say 3 to 6 hours if you're using the video and code, or a week to 2 weeks if you're starting it from scratch and not using any reference. I'm curious though, give me some feedback on that, guys. How are you feeling about this? Because you've sat through this as a 3-day project. I can create this entire project in about 45 minutes. Not trying to brag there, but to give you a benchmark of how, you know, your React progresses. So looking at this and thinking about my estimates, are you like, bullshit, I couldn't get it done in a week or two? Or are you like, oh no, that sounds pretty reasonable? How are you guys thinking about that?
I can go first, I guess. I feel like watching everything in class, like when I go through and read everything on the weekend, there's very rarely am I like, I'm not really sure what that means. You know, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm reading and I'm understanding it fully. I think planning out the functionality and what approach to do and how to code that is where like the biggest hurdle for me. So like if I'm like looking online and stuff, I feel like if I plan everything out and get a general idea of what the project's going to look like, and then kind of go, okay, well, what's the best way to, you know, pull something from local storage or update the state for this or whatever. I feel like I have a better time doing that. Setting up what the site looks like for me is, you know, I find it pretty intuitive. So like the actual HTML, CSS part of it isn't that big of a deal. Just I guess forming those functions and components and stuff.
Yeah, and that's good feedback, right? And that's why I said like start with the requirements list, because you think, oh, a blog, I know how to make a blog, but then you get to your homepage and you're like, I don't even know where to start with this, right? And so starting by breaking down every individual page and saying, well, I got to show the post, I got to have a link to the login, I got to have a read more button, I got to write. When you start getting down to that requirements level, then it becomes much easier to go, oh, this post preview repeats several times on the page. This needs to be its own separate component. Now I can go refresh how to do a component, or, oh, I need separate pages here. I need a router. Let me go look at an existing project that we did in class, or let me go look at the React router documentation and figure that out from there. So I definitely encourage you to do that planning step between, hey, I've got this HTML and ooh, how do I get this to work in React? There's a difference between I just got to change all my classes to class names and, oh, I understand what data needs to go in state and how I'm going to map over that data to get them to show up in reusable components. So that is a good separation of planning that stuff out and separating out those steps. Question was, for those who need user verification for their capstone, does it need to be coded out by the August 8th deadline? No, but you now have learned everything you need to know to get user validation working or user verification. Unless you mean login, sorry, let me clarify. When you say user verification, do you mean authentication with a username and password, or do you mean user verification in terms of not letting them submit data that isn't filled out? Okay. The second option, in that case, for the first, which I know isn't your answer, for the first one, you don't need to build your login systems yet into your capstone for August 8th. You can totally hold off on that. You should have a link to login somewhere, but you don't need to have your login fully operational, built into local storage, any of that stuff, because this isn't the most secure way we'll learn to do it. The only reason we did it this way was to see the whole user flow, routing to different pages, all of that kind of stuff. For the second part of, I need to be able to validate what users type in before they are able to submit the form. Based off of the login screen, we have now seen everything that it takes to do basic user validation on the front end. So you don't need that done by August 8th, but you now know everything you need to know in order to be able to pull that off. So you can definitely take a beginning stab at getting that to work. And that just gets you more points on your August 8th check-in. Okay, that's all I have for tonight. I'm clearly tired. I will stick around for a couple minutes in case any questions pop up. This code is already on GitHub. Congratulations for surviving the end of the blog, at least this iteration of the blog. We do come back to this and we do make it all full stack. And we do add our credentials into this as well. So we'll be setting this up with Clerk and login, setting up our API, connecting it to our database, all of that stuff. So this project is like a zombie. We never can quite completely kill it, but you will escape this project for at least a couple of weeks. Tomorrow we will finish up the chat app. Chat app, we are going to do state and props. We're going to revisit those concepts, make sure we understand how we can pass state and props around, which we don't do too much in the blog project. We will more in the chat. That will finish up our React module. And then again, next week is all about having questions. So I do have a couple projects on standby, more practice in React and making API calls and making the data show up. But I am hoping that I don't have to use any of those projects, hoping that you guys come in with questions. Again, we're at almost at the 2/3 point. After tomorrow's class, we will be. So hoping you guys have questions up until this point on homework catch up, on any concepts in HTML, JavaScript, React, or APIs, or front-end deploys with DevOps. Anything that you've had up until this point, again, that is all about next week to give you guys a breather. We'll still take attendance because there's obviously a lot that we can learn from each other. But that's what's headed up tomorrow, chat project, and next week for open questions and just kicking around project ideas and getting more practice. Other than that, have a great evening. Like I said, I'll stick around for a minute or two for any questions. Otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow.